Digestion. What is digestion? Digestion is the process of breaking down nutrients. Process of breaking down nutrients. Remember, breaking down would be like catabolism, right? To catabolize. And absorbing them into the blood. All right, and once it gets absorbed into the blood, where's it gonna go? You guessed it, it's gonna go to the cells, okay? And then the cells are gonna be able to do work with that, okay? Obviously, a primary driving organelle for this would be the mitochondria. So what system does digestion? Obviously, it's the digestive system. Carries this out, right? The digestion. Right, so obviously it's connected to the circulatory system because the circulatory system helps carry blood, right? And obviously in the blood, it goes to the individual cells, whether that's transporting oxygen, whether that's transporting nutrients, etc. It's very, very important for digestion to occur. They go hand in hand. So obviously, this one breaks down the food, while the circulatory transports them to the cells. All right, so what are the four main steps? The first one is ingestion. It sounds like ingest, right? So obviously it's consumption of the food, taking in the food through the mouth. All right, so take nutrients. All right, the second one would be digestion, which is what we're kind of talking about. There is going to be chemical breakdown because when you ingest the food, where is it going to go? Obviously, it's going to go to your stomach, right? It's going to first go through the oral cavity and then go down the esophagus and then eventually meet the stomach, right? And in the stomach, it has stomach acid, right? So hydrochloric acid, very high concentration, very acidic, and it's responsible for the chemical breakdown, but also physical too, because there is a churning motion within the stomach to help push them together and break the solids apart as well, which the stomach is responsible for too. So the third one after that is the absorption. This is where the circulatory system kind of comes in order to aid the digestive system, right? So the absorption, it transfers. So it transfers those digested nutrients to the circulatory system. I'll just put circ, okay, to the circ system. And the last one is egestion, all right? Sometimes we call it elimination, and obviously elimination sounds like eliminate, right? So this is the removal of the waste. Right? The ones that did not get digested and are able to just exit, that you don't need anymore. You've already gotten the nutrients from them. So if you take an example of this whale here, it's like a beluga whale. Food enters through here. Okay, this is the ingestion portion. There's going to be some breakdown here. I know we talked about the physical breakdown in the stomach, but of course there's going to be physical breakdown from the mouth, right? Obviously the teeth is going to physically break it down. All right, so there's physical. I'll put phys breakdown too. There's also chemical digestion as well, like amylase enzymes too. Okay, so then there's chemical ones as well that break it down. That's why you salivate when you see your food coming to your table at the restaurant, right? Your body is preparing to break down that material, right? The enzymes are in the saliva. All right, so then now you have small pieces of food. Okay, so let's say this is pieces of food. Again, enzymes are continuing to work as it goes down towards the stomach, whether that's hydrolysis enzymes, so like using water to break them apart, or other enzymes involved, and it just keeps going down towards maybe the stomach now. So now they're very, very small molecules. And then obviously from here in these small intestines, it's going to absorb them. The circulatory system is going to bring them all around the body where it's needed to all cells, so the nutrient molecules now enter the body cells. Okay, so I'll just put here, nutrients enter the body cells. And then eventually it's going to get pooped out, so I guess this would be the undigested material. So I'm just going to put here on the left side because I want to refer to this jellyfish here. So it's a very simple animal. It's not very complex with its body parts. So the simple animals have a digestive sac. Put dig here, okay? For digestive, have a digestive sac with a single opening into a gastrovascular cavity. What does that mean? It means that food comes in and it also exits out from the same place, this place, the gastrovascular cavity. Food enters, and that's the important part, and exits. Pretty gross, right? Okay, it's often surrounded by like tentacles to capture the prey. The nutrients are absorbed from diffusion through the cavity. Okay, so in here, in this cavity, nutrients get absorbed that way by diffusion. I think you're probably wondering, or you probably wondered, maybe this was a simple animal as well. But no, a worm is actually very complex compared to something like the jellyfish or a hydra, for example. So let's talk a little bit about the worm here. This is a more complex animal, believe it or not. So complex animals digest food from two openings. All right, so obviously one for food entering and another for food exiting. So unlike this jellyfish here, so I think here is around the gastrovascular cavity. So I'll just put the GV cavity. Again, surrounded by the tentacles, right, to capture the prey. And then it does its thing for the food entering and exiting. For the worm over here, mouth would be like here, for example. And then obviously the anus would be right over there. And along the way, obviously, there's going to be an esophagus, right? So the esophagus is over here. It connects the mouth to the stomach, right? So let's say the stomach is over there. Breaks it down, churns it up physically and chemically, churns it and breaks it apart. And worms also have a gizzard as well. It also helps aid in digestion. Chickens have it too, near the kind of throat kind of area. Then of course we're going to get to the intestines, right? So maybe this here, I'll just point it out. This would be the intestine. So after the gizzard, after the esophagus and the stomach, right? We got intestines to get the circulatory system involved, to give the nutrients away, right? And then it will exit out the anus. Now you see how food passes through each of these, right? So food literally passes through the mouth, goes all the way through, like through the stomach. Okay, so the stomach would also be another example. So maybe I'll put stomach here. Goes through the intestines, right? Small intestine, large intestine. We'll talk more about that in depth shortly. And then obviously goes through the anus as well, right? So all of these would be considered alimentary, okay? So I'll just put here alimentary. Is when food, sorry, is where food passes. But something else, accessory, so an accessory organ, for example, this is when food does not pass through them, but they aid in the digestion. So obviously along the way, near the stomach and the intestines, after the food gets processed and broken down from the stomach, right, from here, it goes into the intestines, and there's going to be a lot of different organs involved, right, to help the intestines with the digestion process, particularly the small intestine. So you're going to have like pancreas, right? So here, I'll put it in brackets here, so it kind of looks like a side object, right? So you got like pancreas, you can get like gallbladder or liver, all right? So these ones here are obviously not where food passes through. They just help with the digestion. They release like gastric juices or absorb sugar. Here, I'll put it on here on the side, on the bottom. These are accessory organs. Accessory organs. Okay, and these just aid in digestion. Like I said, there was two types of digestion. Yeah, I'll just put here two types of digestion. First one was mechanical, and the second one was chemical. So this is obviously the physical breakdown, so I'll just put phys breakdown. Whereas for the chemical, it's like catalysts, like enzymes. Okay, remember, what does it break down? It breaks down those big molecules. Remember those macromolecules, like the carbs, the fats, the proteins? It breaks them down into their basic units. Okay, so enzymes break down to very small units. Obviously, mechanical breaks them down to small units too, but it's the chemical that really breaks them down to very, very small units. So mechanical here would be kind of like mouth, and would be like stomach. And I mean, technically chemical too, right? Chemical is also using the mouth, the stomach. But when we get to the very, very small units to be transported throughout the circulatory system, we really got to get the intestines involved, okay? Particularly the small intestine. All right, so what's the digestive journey? All right, so digestive journey. First one, we have the mouth, okay? After that, we have the esophagus. Again, we'll look at a visual shortly. And then after that, you got the stomach. Maybe you can use this as an opportunity to kind of think what happens next. Okay, so it goes through the mouth, the esophagus, now it's into the stomach. Where do you think it goes next? Can maybe pause the video, try to give it a shot from the top of your head. After the stomach, where does it go? You guessed it, it's the small intestine. Okay, after that, what do you think? It's the large intestine. And then what's the last one? Give it a thought. This one should be pretty easy. Once all the digestion is done and then you have that leftover material, what part of the body releases that leftover material that's not needed anymore? Obviously the rectum, okay? And then, I mean, technically anus is part of it as well, but technically these two are kind of part of the large intestine, but we'll get into that depth a little bit later on. Again, it's a continuum. So these in general, you can consider it the oral cavity. It's an overarching space of area that constitutes of maybe the lips. All right, so we got lips over here. All right, tongue there as well. This one too, right? Lips, tongue, teeth is also part of the oral cavity, and the jaw muscles, right? So you can't literally see the muscle here, but the jaw muscles are involved within this oral cavity. There are salivary glands as well, like I talked about earlier, that releases the digestive enzymes as you're about to eat the food and while you're eating the food. And then last one, we have the pharynx, okay? And this is obviously deeper into the area of the lower cavity, which allows food to pass through, okay? And eventually it's going to go into this esophagus. You obviously don't want the food, you don't want the food to be going this way, because then you're going to be hitting the voice box, the larynx, okay? And like the trachea and all that stuff, right? That's where you cough it up and it's painful, or if you drink water and it goes down the wrong pipe, all right? That's kind of like this pipe over here going down the trachea. You only want air to be going down here. You want the food to be going in there. You see that in the esophagus? Okay, so all this area over here is the pharynx, okay? You don't need to know the specifics of like oropharynx, laryngopharynx, and nasopharynx, but just know that there, this large portion of the area deep within the oral cavity is the pharynx. Food does go through that. It is alimentary, and then it goes through the esophagus, and then eventually it's going to go down to the stomach. All right, so I'll just put here, this is the mouth. All right, so I'll put here mechanical digestion, so I'll put mech, okay? Mech digestion starts here. So what do the teeth do here? The teeth reduces the size of the food, okay? So teeth, and then what does the tongue do? Where's the tongue, okay? The tongue obviously helps move food around, okay? Moves food around. It also helps increase the surface area of the food, so it increases the amount of digestion that happens per second, which is obviously a good thing. There's also going to be some coating of the food, okay? So you know the mucus, you have mucus involved here as well. It coats and lubricates food. Okay, coat and lubricate can kind of be used synonymously. Okay, so it coats the food so that it's easier to be swallowed through. And obviously there's going to be a bunch of enzymes that gets released from the salivary glands, right, which is part of the saliva. Okay, so the salivary glands release the saliva. Okay, so saliva is involved. Okay, obviously to break down as well, right, chemically, to break down chemically. Okay, so for the food to go through, by now it's gone through a lot of the churning in this mouth, right? So it's going to go from this mouth going into this passage of the oral cavity, and it's now ready to go through the pharynx. Okay, obviously when it goes through the pharynx, it's a pretty small passage, so we need to make sure that when the food is swallowed that it's small. Okay, so it's going to be like maybe like that, like kind of like a circular area, because obviously if you compress down from all sides and all angles, it's going to make a spherical kind of shape, right? Very similar to how planets are all spherical because of the gravity from all angles, from all sides. The shape is going to be a sphere due to the gravitational force. So this one over here is going to be known as bolus. Okay, it's a mass of food and it gets easily swallowed through optimally. Then it passes through the pharynx, gets into the esophagus. All right, so this would be like ball of food, okay? Right, so we have here the esophagus. So the esophagus, it's a muscular tube that connects the pharynx and the stomach. Obviously the pharynx is what we just looked at, and then the stomach is where the food gets churned mechanically and chemically. All right, so this here was the pharynx. All right, so there are two sphincters. The cardiac sphincter, or also known as the lower esophageal sphincter, it connects the esophagus to the stomach. So you see this little sphincter over there, I'm kind of highlighting it. This is called the cardiac sphincter, okay? This is a more common term as opposed to the lower esophageal. So I'm just going to use this word cardiac, all right? Because obviously cardiac sounds like what? It sounds like heart, okay? So cardiac sphincter, what does it do? It ensures that any of the acid that is in the stomach does not back up and go up the esophagus, okay? Because that would obviously be detrimental. There is a coating of mucal lining within the stomach over here to ensure that the stomach acid doesn't absolutely break through and degrade outwards, okay? So to ensure safety, there is a mucal lining for all this acid in here, okay? But this sphincter also protects to make sure that the acid does not go out into the esophagus, because then it's going to burn, because there is no mucal lining here for the esophagus. Understood? However, there are times where there is a hiccup of the sphincter of not working optimally. So then, of course, the acid over here is going to go into the esophagus, and it feels like it's a burning sensation. That's why it sounds like a cardiac issue, a cardiac problem. So it feels like it's heartburn. But it has nothing to do with the heart. But it feels like your heart is burning because it's within that area of the esophagus. near kind of like your upper chest kind of area, and if that burns, it kind of feels like your heart is burning, but it's actually not your heart. Now, as the food goes down, so remember it was bolus, right? The bolus went down the pharynx, went down into the esophagus. The esophagus, this area over here, is quite easy to ensure that the food goes down, okay? Because it does something called peristalsis, all right? So the esophagus does peristalsis, which is a series of coordinated like contractions or muscular contractions, okay? So just put muscular contractions that propel or bring down bolus, okay, or the food into the digestive tract. Okay, and we're going to get into detail with this digestive tract shortly, but it's pretty much all the organs and the canals that are involved in digestion. All right, I just want to point out more in detail right now with the stomach. All right, so you see how it's kind of J-shaped, right? So it's a J-shaped kind of organ. It's stretchable. Obviously, if you want to eat more food, it's going to stretch to ensure that you get more calories in. Okay, obviously, there's a limit. You shouldn't be eating too much. It's going to be painful. Okay. It can hold about 1.5 liters of food. Okay, so obviously that bolus over here, I guess this kind of makes it look like that's part of the pharynx. No, it's not. Obviously, this is bolus. Okay, so here I'll make this a little bit bigger. Um, this, okay, this thing is the pharynx, and obviously this here is the bolus. Okay, bolus. So this bolus, as it goes down into the stomach, the bolus becomes chyme. Okay, so bolus becomes chyme. Okay, it's just a mix of food and digestive juices. Okay, we'll learn more about those digestive juices when we get into the accessory organs like the pancreas shortly in this video. So the bolus is right over there, gets churned mechanically and chemically, okay, into very, very small parts, which will go down into the small intestine, and then obviously the small intestine is the prime organ to ensure that those very, very, very small catabolized nutrients uh, get all around your body to all cells with the help of the circulatory system. Let's look at more layers of the stomach. Okay, within the stomach, the innermost layer, I'll use it as maybe like a white color here. This would be the mucosa. Okay, what does it do? It releases mucus. Okay, why is that important? It's to heal any damaged cells, right? Because obviously we have stomach acid over here, which is very acidic. The mucosa releasing the mucus, which is that lining to ensure that there's no damage. If there is damage, a ton of mitosis occurs at a very accelerated rate to ensure that they are repaired. All right, so this is the innermost layer, okay, the mucosa. All right, then we have the next layer. I'll do it in green right now. So this green one over here, is known as the submucosa. Okay, so what does this do? So the submucosa, it connects blood vessels and nerves. All right, so it's getting the nervous system and the circulatory system involved, right? Nerves for nervous, blood vessels for circulatory. So we'll do a different color over here. We'll do it in blue. The next layer is known as the muscularis. All right, what does this muscularis do? And it churns the food. Churns food to ensure that the bolus become chyme. And then the very, very last layer, this is the outermost layer. I'm doing it in red over there. This is known as the serosa. Okay, why is it on the very outside layer? It's to ensure that there is no friction between this and other neighboring organs. So to lubricate, so to prevent friction between organs. Oh, it also helps to ensure that the stomach actually holds place. Just like the cytoplasm ensures that the organelles stay in place, the serosa makes sure that the stomach stays in place. I'll just put here, and also hold stomach in place. A few additional notes that I'm going to be adding is the stomach has folds, okay? So stomach has folds. This is known as rugae. Why are there folds? It helps to ensure that it increases the amount of surface area. Again, to ensure that digestion happens quicker. Okay? Folds also help to grip and churn the food. Okay? So, to grip and churn food. So, I've already talked about the mucus from the mucosa that helps ensure there is protection of the lining. But I also want to talk about pepsin. It's an enzyme. It digests proteins. So for example, the enzymes in the mouth, right, from the saliva, the salivary amylase, as soon as the food touches the tongue, it mostly digests carbohydrates really, really well. But pepsin digests proteins really well, okay? So once it enters the stomach mostly. But there's also another one called renin, okay? This is found in kids only, okay? Because it slows down milk digestion. Because milk is actually very difficult to break down. For kids, it's easier because they have the lactase. It's an enzyme that breaks down lactose, which is obviously lactose is found in milk, right? But on top of that, this renin also slows down the milk digestion to ensure all the nutrients that come out of it are able to be properly and optimally absorbed. As you get older, this is lost. As you get older, also the lactase, the thing that breaks down lactose, also gets lost. This is why most people, especially in certain regions of the world, are lactose intolerant. Right, and I also did talk about the cardiac sphincter already, right? That was like kind of like here, so I'll just put cardiac sphincter. Okay, that was a CS. But there's also another sphincter known as the pyloric sphincter, okay? And that's the cap that ensures that there's no crossover of materials, especially any of the acid, between the stomach and the small intestine. So maybe somewhere like there, okay? So this would be the pyloric sphincter, the PS. And again, it's going to be very painful if a lot of that acid from here is able to get into the small intestine. It's gonna have a burning feeling there too. All right, so let's get to the small intestine. Okay, so this here is the small intestine. It's divided into three main parts. Okay, it is a continuum, so it's kind of a gray area where it ends and starts. Okay, so where does the duodenum end and start? Right? Does it end around here? Does it end around here? Does it end around here? Again, it's a gray area. Okay, same thing with the other two. But regardless, it's a very long system. Okay, so this organ is about 6 meters long. I don't need to write that down, but I just really want you to know that this is very much responsible for the absorption of nutrients. It is the main driver for this function. All right, so some foods travel from the stomach to the small intestine very, very quickly. This makes you hungry pretty quickly. Okay, others move very, very slowly, which will make you satiated and feel full for a longer period of time. So carbohydrates, proteins, fats, they're digested in the small intestines with the help of hormones and enzymes. Okay, so I'll just put here with the help of hormones and enzymes. It takes about, so I'll just put here, okay, this means approximately 3 to 5 hours to process the nutrients in here in the small intestine. Okay, I'll just put SI in the small intestine. But let's look at this first section, okay, the duodenum. It's around 25 to 30 centimeters long. Again, you don't need to memorize these numbers, but it's pretty much where most of the enzymes are added. Okay, so most, okay, here, okay, most here. All right. And then this is where the digestion in the small intestine begins. Okay, so I'll just put here for maybe number 1. Okay, it begins here. All right, then we have the jejunum. So that'll be number 2. The digestion continues and some nutrients are absorbed. Okay, so maybe I'll just make a note here, some absorption. Okay, but the ileum is the most important one. This is the third one, the last one. This is where most of the nutrients are absorbed. Okay, so most absorption. Okay, what's this one down here? This is the villi. Why am I talking about this villi? These villi, and they even have smaller parts in the middle here, the microvilli. Okay, they're even smaller versions of villi. These are all embedded within the small intestine. Why? Because it ensures maximum surface area for efficient nutrient absorption. So I'll just put here, for maximum nutrient absorption. All right, so it actually helps ensure, again, the combination of both, right? The villi here, oops, sorry, the villi and the microvilli here, a combination of them helps to ensure that the digestion increases times a factor by 500. So it's very, very efficient. Okay, so again, within this microvilli, embedded within that are the capillaries. Okay, so I'll just put capillaries. Ensure the nutrients that are being digested currently, right? Ensure that the nutrients get into the blood or the bloodstream. Very similar to how you're going to be learning later on, but like the capillaries are also responsible for the exchange of gases. Okay, so like the oxygen that get breathed in from the outside environment goes into your system, into your thoracic cavity. Eventually, when it goes into the lungs and the alveoli at the very, very smallest level molecularly, it's gonna help this one. It's gonna help ensure to get the oxygen into the blood. It's also responsible to make sure that any of the CO2 that's into the blood gets out. So the capillaries are a very important main driver of this. They are the medium, the middleman, to ensure that the exchange into the blood and from the blood is a primary focus. Okay. Well, I also want to maybe add here, fats are a little bit different. Fats are moved by lacteals first. Okay. Okay, so they're taken first to the lymphatic system, which is another system, just like the circulatory system, the respiratory system. Okay, so it gets sent there first, and then it eventually goes into the bloodstream. All right, so on top of here, we have, again, the PS, right, the pyloric sphincter. I'll write down the whole thing right now. Pyloric sphincter. Again, it's to ensure any of that acid from the stomach up here. So let's say I have the stomach drawn here. Okay, this is the stomach. There's obviously food mixed in here, right? Food mixed. It's going to allow, well, this pyloric sphincter is going to allow some of the food that has been mixed within the juices, right? There's gastric juices in here, which we just looked at, and any proteins that have been broken down here thanks to the pepsin. It periodically releases the food. Again, it's got to be mixed within the food, not just the acid itself. Otherwise, it's going to damage the lining here. Okay, so it's a very controlled process. So I'll just create it as a controlled process to release the chyme. Remember, the chyme was the more broken down version of the bolus that's also been mixed in with more of the gastric juices and the acid. It brings it into here, right, into the duodenum. So why is it slow? It's to prevent overloading, okay? Prevents overloading. Right, so also most of the enzymes that are required for the digestion are actually added into the duodenum as opposed to the jejunum and ileum. Okay, so this is the major place. So here I'm gonna bring this up here as well. The duodenum has most of the enzymes. Okay, so most enzymes added here. Most enzymes added here. Okay, and then again, we haven't talked about the accessory enzymes yet. We will shortly, but remember, like the pancreas, the liver, gallbladder, etc. Okay, they also help. They're the ones that help to ensure that the enzymes and other substances get an entry into the duodenum. Okay, that's why a lot of the heavy load is happening here. This is kind of like a little bit of a resting period, or to ensure that everything else is moving slowly and smoothly. Okay, once all that heavy load is done and it gets to the ileum, okay, that's why the ileum is the place where most of the nutrient absorption occurs, because all the heavy lifting stuff and the breaking down have already been finished. Okay, so it's ready for the major absorption here. All right, so then there are more enzymes for you to know about. There is one called the peptidase. Okay, what does this one do? This one digests proteins, okay? Similar to the pepsin, but pepsin mostly in the stomach, peptidase mostly in the small intestine. Then there's another enzyme. We got sucrase. You should know what that one is, okay, just by the prefix sucra, okay, like sucrose, which is a sugar, so it digests sugars, okay. Amylase, where's this mostly in the mouth, right, from secreted from these from the saliva, okay, but they are also within the small intestine as well, because there's carbs and sugars that need to be broken down here too, okay, not just in the mouth area, okay, so this also digests sugars. And then other ones like maltase, lactase, etc. Okay, there's more, okay, but we'll just end it over there. Okay, so these are some things that digest sugars. All right, so digests sugars. And then we have lipase. Okay, this one digests fats. Okay, very similar to the bile. Okay, bile does the same thing. Okay, this just means the same thing. It also digests fats. Okay, it's actually stored by the gallbladder, which we'll look at as well. So again, most of the digestion of the nutrients, sorry, absorption of the nutrients after the digestion, again, like I said, occurs in the ileum, right? But maybe some parts of the jejunum are also responsible, okay, because we don't know exactly where it ends and starts, okay, where the jejunum ends and starts, okay, so around the jejunum area and around the ileum area, these are where most of the proteins, the carbs, and the fats are absorbed. Okay, but maybe I'll also make a little note here too. Okay, vitamins, minerals, and water absorbed here too. And then they pass through the villi and the microvilli within here, right? So they pass through these things, enter the blood, carried by the capillaries, goes to the tissues within the cells of the body. All right, so now let's look at the accessory organs. All right, so our first accessory organ, here I'll put accessory organs. Accessory organs. The liver, for example, here, it produces bile. Produces bile. Remember, it breaks down, it helps accelerate the processes to break down fats, right? The gallbladder here stores that bile. And then this is the pancreas. It releases digestive enzymes. And then, so looking specifically at the liver, like I said, it ensures that it increases the efficiency for easier absorption, right, by emulsifying the fats. Okay, so maybe I'll put here fat absorption, but also detoxifies the blood. So any toxins, drugs, alcohol, etc., the liver ensures that they are detoxified. So remember, like I said, the intestines were responsible of the absorption, right? So the small intestines, I'll just put SI, the small intestines gave the nutrients, right? Gave the nutrients to the blood, which get to the liver. All right, so which carries in here the nutrients, vitamins, minerals, etc., and other products from the digestion process. All right, so you can see where the gallbladder is. Okay, the gallbladder is right underneath the liver, and like I said, it stores bile, but this one happens a little bit prior to what happens in the liver. Okay, so as the food is going into the small intestine, this storage of bile then gets released. So production of the bile here gets stored over here, goes to the small intestines. Okay, the small intestines are grateful that the bile is helping to emulsify the fats, breaking them down into smaller molecules. And then once those nutrients are absorbed into the blood, they eventually get to the liver. And the liver is responsible for any detoxification. Okay, so I'll just put here, it gets secreted. Okay, secreted into the small intestines. And whatever happens here into the small intestines for the digestion comes back around via the blood, which is the transport medium, goes back to the liver. All right, and then we have the pancreas. Okay, so again, all of this is behind the stomach, right? So obviously the pancreas is behind the stomach as well, and it secretes the hormones, okay, and the digestive enzymes. I guess I forgot to put it there. So I put digestive enzymes. Yeah, it also releases hormones, like insulin, for example. So if there is a high amount of blood sugar in the blood, it's going to release this insulin to ensure that the sugar in the blood isn't just rampant and just flowing around everywhere, because that could be harmful. Where is it going to go? It's also going to go all the way around and then back towards the liver. And then those sugars are stored within the liver. Remember, the sugar gets stored as glycogen within the muscles, but also gets stored within the liver to ensure that if there's any bursts of exercise, they're the first ones to be used up from that storage, okay? The glycogen in the muscles and from the liver, okay? Creating efficient usage of energy. Obviously, if you have too much though, and too much builds up in here, you get problems of fatty liver disease, which is extremely harmful. There's also another very important function from the pancreas regarding the signaling of bicarbonate ions to ensure that the acidic environment that is playing a part in this environment increases in the pH, so it's no longer as acidic. But that's going to get very into deep within the chemistry realm, and we don't need to go that far into detail within the realm of this course. So we're just gonna hold off on that, okay? Okay, so what specific enzymes get released by the pancreas? So we have a release of lipase. Okay, so it breaks down fats. Okay, so fat breakdown. Amylase. Okay, so this was the breakdown of sugar, right? And this one's a new one, okay, and trypsin. Okay, also breaks down proteins. Okay, again, we're not going to be talking about pepsin over here, which is which was another enzyme that breaks down like protein, right? Because it seems like there's many enzymes that break down protein, but again, it really depends on where it is. So pepsin, it works very well in high acidic conditions, so obviously around the stomach area. Okay, but we need to continue breaking down proteins even in the small intestine, okay, which is what these organs help with. Within the small intestine, we don't want it to be too acidic. It's going to harm that area, okay, because there's not much lining of mucus. So how are we going to continue to break down protein? We use another enzyme, okay? So instead of pepsin, trypsin would be better, because trypsin works in higher pH conditions, so not as acidic. All right, this here is the large intestine, okay? So I'll just put here large intestine. It's about 1.5 meters long, over I think 6 or 7 inches, 6 or 7 centimeters wide. And it goes from the small intestine, so I'll just put here maybe a small intestine, okay? So this was the SI, the small intestine. And it goes from there all the way down to the anus. And this is where the food is expelled. Okay, and there is a smooth lining here. Okay, so I'll just put here smooth lining. All right, it helps move substances. Other roles that you should know about: it reabsorbs the water. Also some salt and vitamins. And it holds and compacts. Unabsorbed material. And there's also some bacteria that are very important to synthesize certain vitamins. Synthesize, I'll just put synth, okay, for synthesize, has bacteria that synthesizes vitamin B and K. Okay, so at this point, after the small intestine has done all that work, what we just talked about the past few minutes, most of the digestion has actually been complete. Okay, so the the large intestine mostly does, like I said, the absorption of water. Okay, the reabsorption of water. So the fluid comes from the water in the diet, and like saliva and then the gastric juices. And like I said, these get absorbed too. So on top of the time from the digestion of the small intestines, it requires even longer time for the process to be complete of the overall digestion in the large intestine, about 4 to 72 hours. So it can take 4 to 72 hours for the complete passage here in the large intestine. LI, okay, large intestine. All right, so now let's dissect the cecum. All right, so the cecum receives material from the small intestine, okay? So I'll put receives material, or yeah, so I guess material will be the good word. Receives material from small intestine, the SI. The colon, however, helps transport the material to the rectum, okay? And there's many different moving parts of the colon. There's an ascending part and there's a descending part, but we don't need to get into the specifics. But it is the longest part, okay? So maybe I'll put here the longest part. All right, eventually it makes its way down to the rectum. Rectum, there is a holding of waste, holds waste. And then finally the anus, this is where the feces or the stool, okay, they mean the same thing. Stool is a more medically professional term, but we can still use the word feces. Okay, the feces exit here. And you're probably wondering what this little thing is here. What do you think this is from the top of your head? Some of you might already know what it is. Yep, it is the appendix. Exact reason is unknown. Some people say that this is a site for specific types of bacteria that are used to synthesize certain vitamins that we needed to have, that we needed back then based on the foods that we were eating, but due to maybe dietary changes or adaptations, no longer needed the synthesis of those vitamins from those bacteria, and then this is why it's no longer functioning or has a function. But let's specifically talk about the defecation process, okay, where how the feces get exited. So let's look at the rectal sphincter. So where is the rectal sphincter? So just between the large intestine and the rectum. So maybe this is the large intestine, okay? I mean, this whole thing is, but I guess the major part, okay, the colon, right, the longest part, let's get it from there and compare it with the rectum, okay, which is like right here. So that would be like the middle ground. So this over there would be the rectal sphincter, or the RS. again, ensures that food doesn't go into, so not food, the materials here, the undigested materials, don't go into the rectum unless it's ready, okay? But just letting you know the RS, okay, I'll just put here the RS, the rectal sphincter, is involuntary in its control. Okay? However, we have another sphincter, the anal sphincter, which is between the rectum and the anus. So let's put it right over there. So this is the AS, anal sphincter. And then this one, the AS, has voluntary control. So when you gotta go and take a number two, but you need to hold it to ensure that you get to the bathroom fast enough. It's the anal sphincter that is responsible of holding it in to make sure it doesn't come out at the wrong time. All right, I also want to add here fiber or cellulose is key to ensure satiety. Okay, that means to be feeling full. So foods that are low in fiber will make you feel hungry way quicker. So it's important to make sure that you have those the, the fibers in your diet. And fiber is only found in plants. So it's very, very important that you consume a high diet of plant foods. Not only do they help you feel full longer, it also helps to ensure that there is a retention of water so that the large intestines can reabsorb it. Because otherwise the egestion or the elimination to get it out over here is going to be very difficult, because obviously a well-hydrated material is going to be easier to transport. So I want to ask you two questions that I want you to ponder and think about. Try to answer these two questions. What if there is too much water absorption? Again, the undigested material have entered from the, again, this was the SI, right? The small intestine went into the passage of the large intestine. Now, this undigested material that has gone through, what does it say? First question, too much H2O absorption, okay, or reabsorption, okay? So this large intestine over here is trying to take out even more water before this undigested material is egested or eliminated. But what if it takes out too much water? Okay, so it goes back within our systems, okay, within our internal body. So too much, all right, so too much H2O is being reabsorbed back inside. What's going to happen? This thing is going to now feel dehydrated. So is it going to be more painful for it to continue its journey, or is it going to be less painful? Again, just take a pause, try to think of the answer in your head, and use your logic. All right, I hope you guessed that it's going to be more painful. So it's going to feel like you are constipated, okay? Constipation feeling. Because it's not plump anymore, right? This undigested material, and it's going to feel more friction as it goes along its path. So it's going to be painful. Okay, what if it's too little absorption? So I'll just put a very, very small arrow this time. Okay, you see that very, very small arrow? Okay, only a little bit is actually absorbed. So a lot of this undigested material has lots of water content. Do you think it's going to be easy to get out, or do you think it's going to be more difficult to get out, okay, along its journey? Obviously, it's going to be easier, but if it's too easy, this is going to result in an overly hydrated stool. Okay, so I'll just put here overly hydrated. Okay, because not much got absorbed. Okay, so not, because I'll just put too little H2O absorbed. So then this is going to result in the feeling of diarrhea. So I'll just put here, which is also going to result in a feeling of dehydration, because inside your internal body over here, right? Remember, this was the internal body, okay? That is receiving that water from this food, okay? So this internal body lost too much water because all that water passed with that undigested material and got released. So I'll just put feeling of dehydration.